in Fort Lauderdale, guess what? Me will be the recipient of the prestigious Lifetime Awards. Don't take out one syllable of the meaning of the word prestigious. It's a lifetime affair. Nothing less. You know, I'm getting here.
I'm gonna try to work from my head.
No, never be the recipient. And taking it to another level.
Know what I am doing? Downloading the Western Union app. I need to send money to my auntie in Nigeria. Know what I am doing now? Checking today's exchange rate to Nigeria on the Western Union app. Now, I'm sending my auntie money to help her with her groceries.
Download the Western Union app today. Use it to check today's exchange rate and send money to loved ones in Nigeria. Western Union, moving money for better.
Western Union makes money from currency exchange. Carefully compare fees and exchange rates, which may vary and are subject to change. NMLS number 906983.
For the most authentic Caribbean food in town, check out Sunsplash Caribbean Bakery and Restaurant. They got natural organic juice bar that'll get your day started right. Like the Power Punch, the Beef Juice, the Mega Green, roots like the Immortal and the Resurrection. Peep this, they have an extended bakery department that whips up my favorite, the hot Hardo bread. White or wheat, that's your choice.
If you're feeling hungry, just grab a bite. Jamaican party, I tell our veggies. Makes the tea up pretty calm, meal porridge.
Serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They also cater to vegans and vegetarians with the Ital stew and the Ital aki, the soul jerk salmon and mango tilapia. And of course, they got the usual curry goat, oxtail, brown stew chicken, jerk chicken, and so much more. I mean, their menu is extended and they're highly rated. Your best bet is to just stop by or give them a call. They're open Monday through Wednesday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Thursday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Sundays, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They're located at 56 Main Street in Orange, New Jersey, and can be reached at 973-395-3777.
Each day are some hungry days. We need some more food up on the empty plate. Long time
food is that yours? It's a short. You need the other one? Alright, give me a second. I just gotta make sure mine.
Let your food be a medicine. Longer. I'm David Shepard and I endorse this commercial.
You wanna answer that, don't you? I bet it's killing you, seeing that soft glow just inches away. Hey, someone wants to tell you something, or maybe ask you something.
Ah, come on, answer it already. Just so we're clear, that wasn't my fault. Next time, ignore your inner thoughts. Don't text and drive. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Council and your friends here at Splash Radio.
Give us like 7 minutes.
Splash Radio, 94.3, New Jersey, Rich.
Well, I don't know, so Mr. G represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We just splash out the music on them.
Do I have mine?
Eric, she may have one.
Your attention, please. This is no ordinary show. Covering news and information for Essex County, New Jersey, and beyond. This is the Eric Dawson Radio Show. Broadcasting from 94.3 Splash Radio. Now, here's your host, giving it to you like only he can. It's Eric Dawson.
Hey, this is Eric Dawson, and this is the Eric Dawson Radio Show, 94.3 FM. Caller number 973-457-8000. Again, it's 973-457-8000. If you're listening through your mobile devices, 213-493-0287. Again, it's 213-493-0287. And as always, you can check us out. We're streaming live on Facebook. You can check me out on my Facebook page. And I think Rashon is streaming live as well. I want to welcome him to the show.
Good morning, brother. How you doing today?
Hey, man, I can't complain. It is what it is. I do what I do. And then we want to welcome our guests, because folks who are looking in, So do you want to
looking like who's this unfamiliar face?
Who's this unfamiliar face, man?
But, we have with us this morning Mrs. DeNiqua Matias, good friend, former board member, huge advocate and supporter of public education in the city of Newark and throughout the state of New Jersey. So welcome and thank you for being with us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, everyone.
So before we get started with today's show, I will yield the mic to you and give you an opportunity to introduce yourself to our listeners and our followers today.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is DeNiqua Matias. I am a former Newark Public Schools Advisory Board member, 2012 to 2015. I was the Program and Instruction, or formerly Curriculum, Committee Chair. I served on Finance Committee. Currently, I am the Assistant Director of Clinton Hill Community and Early Childhood Center. We were the first star-rated child care center in the state of New Jersey, awarded last year, 2015. I'm sorry, 2 years ago, 2015. And I have 2 children in public school, American History High School and Quitman Street Community School, and a little one in preschool right now. So I'm very excited to be here and talk about everything that's happening in education in Newark.
Good. So let's just jump right in. There have been some issues that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. We've had discussions ranging from school discipline, the closing of charter schools, and last week we actually scratched the surface a little bit on the topic of preschool education and the importance of preschool education, particularly within our community. I know this is your wheelhouse.
Yes.
You have a lot of experience in the early childhood development aspect. So, from your perspective, are we properly servicing families in the city of Newark? And by properly servicing them, meaning, do we have the appropriate resources available for them to enroll their children in pre-K programs?
So I think one of the things I will applaud the district on is really expanding public awareness on free preschool, especially within the city, and certainly through coalitions throughout the state, expanding the idea that preschool is important and very critical to children succeeding in elementary school. On the district level, I think there's a couple of challenges that we face. There's a partnership between district preschool programs and community-based providers, I'm a community-based provider. Our facilities aren't exactly equipped to handle preschool standards as they exist today. So in the public schools, you're finding they have individual hubs, independent hubs that are strictly preschool, 3 and 4-year-olds, and then you have actual elementary schools that are opening up preschool classrooms. So in those hubs, there's a lot of investment made into making sure that that environment is suitable for preschool children. However, in the district schools, the accommodations are a little difficult. They've always been K-8 environments, and to sort of change that to fit that preschool model, I think there's some challenges there. And then having money to invest in community-based providers that want to improve their facilities, their institutions. A lot of providers have been serving preschool children for 20, 30 plus years, but they don't have access to the funds to really make those facility improvements and bring about the high quality standards that we would like to see in all our preschool classrooms.
So what do you think we need to do as a community to help ensure that we have those funds available? Because I'm a product of a quality preschool provider in the city of Newark, the Chin School, which has been around for a while. We have programs like the Leaguers, the program that you and your family have started. We also have La Casa de Don Pedro, Iron Brown Community Center that are servicing thousands of children. So from your perspective, what can we do as a community to help ensure that we actually have the funds available to make those investments that you just mentioned?
So I think everything starts on from the basis of knowing, right? So we need to know which avenues of fundings are available. You mentioned Chin School. They were blessed to be able to get a new facility through the Teacher Village project downtown. Yeah. So they have a beautiful new facility, but we need to bring more of those public-private partnerships into our communities. And in awareness of what funding models are out there, what funding models are available. Obviously, with charter schools, you see a lot of development happening. They have access to state dollars. They have access to private partnerships where, you know, those underwriters get tax credits. Those same models are not available to community-based preschools. And then even on the district level, their opportunity to access capital improvement dollars is limited as well. So as a community, I think we need to find out what's available and then advocate on a state level for those opportunities to be available to all public institutions and not just a specific entity.
So when I think of the conversations that are happening locally, mm-hmm. what we're talking about right now was not any. I didn't hear any mention of this during the recent school board election. We did see an op editorial that was written by Senator Teresa Ruiz about a week ago, which really talked about the state's lack of commitment to fully fund pre-K programs throughout the state of New Jersey. So, do you feel like we're from a local context? Do you think we're missing the opportunity to really dive in on this and really, you know, have an opportunity to kind of weigh in on this and have an impact on how pre-K programs are funded?
Yeah, I think there's got to be a more concrete and easily identifiable agenda for the city of Newark on what we want. Even during our time on the board, you know, we wanted local control. We wanted local control, and we were really set on that. And, you know, I'm happy to see that progress is moving in that way. But what does that mean? What does that look like when we get it? And how do we continue to develop relationships in Trenton? How do we continue to have a strong voice even once that happens?
So here's my question for you. All right. So you need advocates.
Yep.
All right. And what I continue to argue is that they don't exist right now, mm-hmm. For a number of reasons. And to be quite honest with you, I think that a lot of our elected officials don't even understand what's going on. Like if you sat them down, you would have to educate them from page one on what's going on. So, and I don't even know how interested they are in it. So without having those advocates, how do you succeed? How do you see a path to success?
That's a good question. I don't think that we are without advocates. I think that we are without enough, and I think that we don't have one dominant, popular, strong community-wide face to put to that. But there are definitely people in the community who are organizing, who are moving, people on the board even right now who are advocate for our children. I think it's just having that centralized voice. Now, I absolutely agree with you in terms of educating our elected officials on what the real needs are of the community, because a lot of time in politics that kind of gets shined over, and we look for those things that are low-hanging fruit that we could kind of pin our hat on.
I'm going to stop you. So if our elected officials are not educated on the real needs of the community, mm-hmm. then on what basis are they elected to office? It's not a trick question, no. But you understand what I'm saying?
I do.
If our elected officials should be elected by special interest groups within our community who are looking for advocates who are going to push their agenda. So if you're a parent, then you want people in elected office who are going to be sensitive to your needs as a parent. If you are an elderly person, then you want people who are going to be sensitive and help push policy that impact you as an elderly person. If the elected officials are not dialed in on the real issues impacting our community, then on what basis is the electorate electing them?
So here's what happened, right? During the campaign cycle, we're engaged, we're going to rallies, we're speaking up at meetings, we're participating in this process, and then after we elect officials, we step back and we be quiet and we figure, hey, you know, they know what we want now, let them go do their job. So I don't want to say it's all on elected officials, it's on the community too.
Oh, absolutely.
And it has to be holding their feet to the fire. It has to be continuing to go to
Does
meetings.
the community really know what they want? I mean, you understand?
So yes, as a community, I think there's so many issues though that compound us in Newark that you get hot and heavy over one thing and then boom, there's the next big issue.
Because I'll give you an example. Just a couple years ago, there were thousands of kids in the street marching and protesting against Cami Anderson, against the One Newark plan.
Yep.
Right? And everybody believed that the community was united against the One Newark plan, and that's what that whole thing was about. Well, since Cami has been removed, that One Newark plan has been in full effect. And I don't see the thousands of people marching in the street. I don't see the jam-packed meetings during the Board of Education. I don't see any of that. And so my question is, the community itself, we blame elected officials, but because of the fickleness of the community itself and the electorate, there's just a tremendous amount of confusion about what it is that we really want, that we may not be dialed in on what we need.
And I think that's that lack of having, you know, one principal leader, one principal person who all of that is filtered through. So in terms of the situation with One Newark, there were a lot of issues, especially when the plan rolled out. Children being placed at different schools, in the same families, families getting selected to schools that they didn't want. And so completely the rollout, you know, was a mess, but the intention and the principle behind it did have some merit. And I think that got coupled, the issues with that got coupled with the fact that Cami Anderson, they did not feel like deserved to be running this district, was not sensitive to the needs of the community. And so everything got lumped together with, this is Cami's plan, let's get Cami out. And I think if we had that one leader, we had that person who was sort of driving the message, who was honing the agenda of the community, we would be able to get things done a lot better. It would not be this 1 minute this is the issue and the next minute this is the issue, and we're forgetting how this all fits into one big agenda.
So we should be waiting. So who should we be waiting for to do that? I mean, because I got to tell you, I'm confused. We went to I attended the Black Issues Convention. And at the Black Issues Convention, and it's been going on for about 40 years now. And at that convention, the mayor, along with other elected and selected leaders in our community, they stood up and said, we need to have an agenda. And I'm saying to myself, well, wait a minute. Every year you say we need to have an agenda. And you all are the same ones standing behind the podium saying we need to have an agenda. So nobody's putting forth an agenda, right? We all recognize we need to have an agenda. You say that somebody needs to come forth with one. So maybe that's why we're stuck in the mud, because everybody's waiting for somebody else to do it. You know, it's like a running back dropping a ball, like fumbling, and everybody's standing around waiting for somebody else to pick it up
and run into the goal line. Yeah, no. So I don't think it's that we're without an agenda. I think it's that we're without a person to collate it and drive it and continue to bring us back on message, to continue to not let us be sidelined when little things happen and take us off message, take us off track. And that's what we're missing. Now, who that person is, or who that person could be, I don't know. There are several voices in the community. Like I said, there are several advocates and organizers that are doing it, but how to bring all of those different community interests together and keep us on message, I think that's something that has escaped us for a long time.
And so what do you think the primary, as a former board member, what do you think that singular message should be?
Education equity, right? So we talk about the disparity within our education system. We talk about, and it really became a charter versus traditional public battle, but it's really about all of our children deserve the right to be in classrooms that are high quality, with teachers that are high quality. They deserve a great education, and that has to be taken at the root. That has to be where we're working from. We have to understand how school funding systems work, and that if we continue, I'm happy to see that the proliferation of charters in Newark has slowed down, but if we continue to grow that charter school market, we are going to continue to dry up funds from the traditional public school market. So how does that affect education for everybody? And I think that has to be the center of it. We want the state to be accountable to us for building facilities that are safe, that are healthy, that are adequate for our children. It has to be centered in, we want equity for all children, no matter where they live, no matter what school they go to.
So as we continue to have these conversations about what needs to happen in order to grow our community, we always come full circle to education. Mm-hmm. So education, again, we had these conversations. We know that this is the foundation of many communities, right? Individuals move and consider three major things when purchasing a home, right? Taxes, safety within the community, and then the educational system. So with that being said, let's shift this conversation a little bit and talk about what we think needs to happen in order to re-engineer our education system. You've served on the board. You've seen some of the efficiencies and also inefficiencies that exist within the educational system. From day one, when local control is restored here to Newark, what's the first step that we should be taking in order to re-engineer our public education system?
That's a tough question. I mean, I think politics, for what it's worth, I think politics plays a lot in the detriment of our educational system. I think making decisions based on political alliances, making decisions based on political expedience, making decisions based on your own personal or professional advancement has hindered us as a community, right? And it may just be that we've gotten used to the environment that we live in, so whenever we see a crumb, we're snatching at it. But that can't be. I think that has really hurt us as a community, as a district. That has kept us from having a great education. So the first thing I would want to see is, what does that local control look like, right? Is it a locally elected board? Is it an appointed board? Is it a hybrid? And is our community prepared to elect an efficient board? Because our school board elections, the turnout is not always great. And so there has to be some education piece that happens even before we get to that point of attaining local control. We need to be able to, just like with our mayor, our council, we need to be able to hold our school board officials feet to the fire the same way.
Well, I don't bite my tongue when I say that. I don't think that Newark is ready for local control. I got a phone call on my way in today from an old friend of my dad's who called and said that he's been out of loop for a while. He's up in his 70s, and he said he happened to be looking at Channel 78, and he noticed that Marquise Lewis was elected president of the Board of Education. And he said, "Eric, how could they do that?" I said, "Well, because you allowed them to." I said, so in as much as I blame those 9 people because he voted for himself, those people who sit on the board, I blame all of the elected officials, all of the selected officials, and then I blame the electorate itself for looking and saying, you know what, we are going to take this gentleman and we're going to say that he is the best and the brightest that we have to offer, and we're going to present him not only to the city but to the state and to the nation in terms of what we think about education in our community. And I said this to you before, Rashon. Whoever the governor is, I am going to beg that he or she refuse to return local control to a group of people who have not demonstrated that they understand the value of education?
So the school board is an incredible responsibility, even in an advisory capacity. And, you know, I think anyone who is willing to go through the trials and tribulations of campaigning and seeking that office, I applaud them for that. But I think there is a lot of preparation that has to be done before you take up that responsibility, and definitely a lot of soul searching. So when I decided to run for the board, it was because I went to a forum and I was hearing the candidates speak, and not one person actually talked about education. You know, they said a lot of nice sound bites, but and no one had a child in the school system. So it's, you know, you ask the question, okay, so how can you really be in tune with the issues and the needs of parents if you don't have a child in the school system? How can you be in tune with education and drive educational policy if you don't even come from that world, that background? You have no prerequisite knowledge. And so that was my driving decision for running for the school board. But I think there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. I think that you have 9 members on that board who all come from different perspectives. You have to be able to argue your points and argue them from a perspective of what is best for our children. Are we there yet? I'm not sure.
So Stephanie, one of our frequent listeners and supporters, in terms of you talking about equity, she says you can have and offer education equity, but without support in the home, it is impossible to achieve. So what I was going to do is provide an analogy. I think it's equitable to take a bunch of kids and put them on a racetrack to give them the opportunity to win the race. But beyond that, once the gun goes off and they start to run, those who are best equipped will win. And if you now say, well, I want equitability all the way to the finish line, that then requires you shackling those who are ahead to pull them back so that the ones who are behind can catch up.
So let's use your analogy, right? You're putting all the children on the racetrack. The preparation that goes into them running that race is what I'm saying should be equitable. Not that all children need to get to the finish line at the same time, because all children are different. But all children should be able to be in classrooms that are reasonably sized. All children should have access to high quality teachers. All children should have access to materials and supplies in the classroom that support their education. When you look at the differences between a school that is low performing and a school that is high performing, I mean, just walking in the building is a glaring example of the inequities, right? We want a child to be prepared for a 21st century education without
so
science
you said
labs.
so wait a minute. So if we let's take Science Park, right, and let's take an underperforming high school in Newark. If you literally took all of the kids out of that underperforming school and literally just said, you know what, this is going to be your new building. So now, in terms of the lighting, the paint, all those things, all those exterior things that we say negatively impact a child's ability to compete. So we put them there, and then we take the Science Park kids and we put them in that a building that housed those failing kids. What do you believe would happen?
So I don't think it's as simple as that. One, I think the population of students, or the majority of the population of students at Science Park, come with different needs, right? So there's 2 parts to it. It's the part of the school and what they're providing in terms of education, and then there's the part of the school and what they're supporting in terms of social-emotional growth and facing adversity. And so there are some challenges that children who are in the less performing schools or in comprehensive schools come with. And so there's a holistic approach that has to happen that may not necessarily have to happen for a population of students at Science Park. but the preparation in terms of making sure that they're ready to get on the track, ready to run the race, that is what I'm talking about. And it may not be the same for every student.
So I have to jump in here on this piece. I think that when you consider those two, if you take those population of students from that failing or that comprehensive school, right, and you put them in that facility at Science Park, I believe that you will see a difference in how those students perform. The same way you would see a difference in how the employees who got up every day and went to teach inside of a school that had, that was a dilapidated facility. There's a different level of motivation for those individuals now going into a facility that's nice, that's clean, things actually work. You don't have to worry about going into a room where the smart board doesn't work and the teacher can't do what they need to do on the smart board. It does something to you psychologically, and it does something to you emotionally. As a student, if you were faced with having to walk into one of those facilities day in and day out, you probably start to feel, well, people don't care about us. Now we get into that conversation of equity now. Why do we have the school building that's falling apart where the kids that go to school on the other side of town have a new building? So when we talk about provide those different resources, I believe it definitely does have an impact on students. And it might not be huge when you talk about student improvement or overall student achievement, but I guarantee you it does have an effect to students' motivation, wanting to be inside of those facilities. And I personally believe that there's a correlation to the attendance of students who attend those schools.
Forget about that. As children get older, there's not as much emphasis on social emotional development and really how that affects mental health. But that has to be a critical factor. We have to make sure that all of our buildings are saying, you belong here, you have a space here, you're safe here, you're loved here. That plays a huge impact on a child's development.
Well, I mean, I haven't looked at the numbers. I have you, Rashon, on the show to, kind of break that down. I guess my question then becomes, because I read an article that I want to get into. I don't know if you read it. I emailed it to you this morning about these communities that are seceding from their district school, and they're creating their own district within a district, right? Because they're recognizing some of the issues that we're talking about. And so if you are a parent and you have your child in a school and you believe everything that we're talking about now, that it's a dilapidated school, and that dilapidated school is going to yield poorer results because people are going to be less motivated, then my question becomes, where is the parent now engaging in a way to fix that?
So that definitely is something that we're seeing across the district, even as young as preschool, that parents just don't understand how strong and critical their voice is. I know there are a couple of organizations. The district has a program called Parent Academy. We partner with Southward Children's Alliance. They have a program called Family Academy. And so it's all about helping parents understand their roles and responsibility in parenting and their connection with the school and what they should be doing. They have to be their own best advocates. I think it's a little difficult, though, when you have this generation that has come through the system that has kind of accepted that this is what it is. I don't have to take my child to school because I didn't go to school every day, or I don't have to argue for my child's needs or what I feel the school should have because nobody did it for me. So there's a whole investment that needs to be made in two generations on what the role of a parent is and how you can solve these problems. I also think that parents, because you do see some of them out there advocating and speaking up, I think parents get a little defeated at times too, feeling like they're on their own and that there's no bridges. So there's an awareness piece, there's an education piece, and there's a support piece that needs to all come together.
So let's get back to the conversation earlier about not having focus on that one agenda. Well, let's talk about the parents, right, who go through these various academies that are in place, what is the overall agenda been for these parents as they learn how to be advocates, right? Once they go through this process, what are they then told, hey, you know, this is something that we should all be advocating for? Are they told that or given that kind of guidance?
They actually are. One of the oldest parent advocacy training programs that I'm aware of, and there may be others, Abbott Leadership Institute. I actually went through it. And
salute to Kalina Berryman.
Kalina Berryman, yes. Junius Williams. And that has been a really great program in a format, and I think something that probably needs to expand, because they've produced at least 3, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, at least 3 elected officials or people who have run for the board, and given them the knowledge and tools to, you know, to put forward and go and spread the word. So I think there's a charge at the end of that. Now, whether all these programs hold up that charge, I don't know, but I think that needs to be the end game, that we're giving you this information, we're giving you this knowledge, and we want you to go forth and share and do something with it. So there's a call to action that has to happen.
So my concern around the advocacy piece, particularly with parents, I think that as a part of, you know, we've seen a lot of organizations come online over the last few years. Advocacy, to me, has just become another buzzword. Mm-hmm. You say advocacy in the public education space, particularly in Newark, that's code word to funders and other individuals on the back end to say, we want to get people elected. Mm-hmm. That's what the code word advocacy really means. And my problem is that there just hasn't been a citywide agenda that's been developed that everybody can jump on and really support. So local control, right? Everybody's like, yeah, I want local control, yada, 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 right? But then when we start talking about the issues with facilities, mm-hmm. like that's an issue that all parents in the community can really rally around and support, because independent charter schools also deal with these facility issues because they don't have access to the funds that, you know, our CMOs might have access to. We have our traditional public schools that are dealing with that, right, and trying to figure out how the SDA is going to get money to them. We have our independent preschool providers that are dealing with this as well, right? And guess what? The thing that's constant about all of those groups is that they all have parents. Mm-hmm. So why haven't we taken this facilities issue that we know is impacting our children, and not just the children, but also teachers, mm-hmm. administrators, because they have to go into these same facilities? Why haven't we taken that as the one leading item that we can get the entire community behind?
I think because that's a longer range issue, and like I said, most of our drivers, most of our elected officials are issue pushers. They like to get something that's, you know, low-hanging fruit, something that they can say in 2 to 3 months, hey, we did that, let's celebrate that. But I think that's a good point, and that is something that the community, everybody, even if you're in a great facility, you know, you should be able to understand and want for your neighbor and the next student to have access to that. So I think that's a great point.
Yeah, but I don't want to dispute the idea of improving the facility, but I'm going to say again, when I was in school, mm-hmm. right, Science High School was down on Rector Street. Mm-hmm. It was a busted up building that was purchased for $1 by the city from Rutgers. We excelled in there, irrespective of the big water bugs and everything else, the peeling paint. And there were some schools that were more beautiful than our schools. I would walk past Weequahic High School to get on the bus on Chancellor Avenue to go to my little factory school where we were churning out, you know, kids who, you know, were excelling. And at Weequahic, they were failing. So, you know, I just want to make sure that, you know, when we're talking about, you know, facilities and all those kinds of things, you know, we're not really, you know, giving, you know, false excuses to people who can, you know, and should be succeeding in spite of. I want to make sure that we're not doing that.
Yeah, so I don't think it's I don't think that's an excuse for anyone to not right? Do what they have to do when they're in school. That's not an excuse.
But you understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't want somebody to watch this broadcast go, oh, well, see, that's why Johnny's not reading.
It's not an excuse. But let's think about this, though. That first group of students that were enrolled in Science High when they moved from Rector Street into a new facility, how did that make those students feel? Like, were they more motivated? I'm not saying that they went to school and they excelled and they did better, but was that a little bit more motivation for them to now be in a new facility? Like, that has to make you feel good as a student to be able to move from that old.
I get that,
right?
but what I'm going to say is this: you can look at places in Africa and other places where kids don't have buildings, where they're sitting in mud huts and they're learning, right? So I just want to, I want to say it begins at home. Preparation to me begins at home. Wanting equitability for your child begins at home. And you doing that work at home and preparing them for a learning experience for their life. And then I don't think it matters where that kid is and is learning. That kid's going to learn. And so I don't want to take the pressure off of the home and off of the community to say education has to be primary, because once you do, and once you give them an excuse to say, well, it's a building, it's peeling paint, it's something else, then it allows them to kick back and say, well, see, it's not me. It's not the fact that I'm not engaged. I'm not sitting down with my kid, even though they're in a school that's falling apart, making sure that I'm doing the homework with them every day, because they're not doing that.
Yeah, no, and I will absolutely agree with you. It is not a scapegoat or an excuse. Parents, definitely, you're your child's first teacher, and so but if we're talking about it, looking at it comprehensively, looking at it from all sides, the public school has to recognize, right, that children come to school with these issues. Children come to school with parents who aren't necessarily engaged. Children come to school with parents who aren't necessarily in a position to make sure that all of their child's needs are met. So the public institution has a responsibility to step up to the plate where it can and when it can. The city itself has a responsibility to recognize these issues and step up to the plate where
and I think organizations within the community have to step up and do their jobs, right?
Yep.
And so when we talk about this, and tomorrow I'm going to have Jack Ciattarelli on, the Republican who's running for governor, right? And he's going to be talking about his funding plan for education. And so when they listen to the discussion that we're having about all of the hurdles that a child has to jump over before they can sit in a classroom and begin to excel, and then folks who are in West Orange, for instance, who West Orange is the highest taxed city in Essex County, right? And they say, well, okay, so some of my tax dollars have to go toward that kid being able to jump over those hurdles to get in school, to be able to have a chance to be competitive. And they say, well, why should my money supplement what a parent isn't doing in his or her home, when the money can come back, my tax dollars can come back in my pocket, because I'm doing what I should be doing for my kid. And so you're saying to me, and when you speak equitability, right, if I'm in West Orange, I'm saying, so equitability is I break my back sitting down doing my kid's homework with my kid. And we are involved in our community to make sure that drugs and crime are lowered. We do all of those things in our community, right? And so we pay to live here. Now you want me to take some of my money and move it to you, where you guys don't care enough about who you elect for your Board of Education, who you elect for your leadership to set policy, right? Who you elect, and we don't have a say in that. We can't vote for those people, because maybe if they could vote, they'd vote some other people in, and they would secure their investment in Newark and in other urban communities. So what do you say to a guy like Jack Ciattarelli, who's going to say to me, hey, listen, I think that money should go back in the pockets of those people in West Orange and back in the pockets of those people in some of these other urban communities that are shouldering this burden to create this equitability that we keep talking about?
I think we have a social responsibility to make sure it happens. you want an educated populace, you want an educated generation, because children in Newark grow up to be adults who can find their way into West Orange. And you want the person that's living next to you to be just as educated, just as prepared, and just as socially responsible as you are being. And while I hear the argument of, you know, it's unfair that I have to pay more to supplement and support this city or other urban cities who have these challenges, we all have that responsibility.
But we can argue the fact that there is a real movement of people who are saying, you know what, we're going to move over here, we're going to take care of our kids are going to be the boss of your kids, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just how it's going to be. We're going to live in the big houses, we're going to make sure we have enough police to keep you out of our community, right? That's, mm-hmm. And, you know, this article, and I'm going to post it here, I'm going to send it to you, mm-hmm. And, you know, I know you didn't have a chance to, because I didn't send it to you, so you didn't read it. But it's talking about these communities of people, wealthy people, who are seceding and creating their own districts out of a larger district. They're realizing that the money that they can invest in their schools to make sure that their children are educated, right, that they want to target that money into these schools. And a judge upheld a lot of them doing it. And so I think over the last 10 years or so, it says some almost 30 have done it. And so when you say to those people, well, you have a responsibility because the person who lives two blocks down, that you just redrew a district line, and you guys are now pumping your personal money into the schools where your kids go to ensure they have the books and everything else that they need to be able to succeed. You know that they're going to outpace those kids, mm-hmm. in a huge way, and they don't feel like they have a social responsibility.
Well, everybody's not going to feel that way. Right. That's the reality of it. But
what I'm saying is that we in our community are waiting for somebody else to feel like they have more responsibility to take care of our children than we have to take care of our own children. That's what I'm getting at.
No, that's I'm not saying that.
I'm not saying that you're saying that. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that it appears that that's where our community is. Mm-hmm. That they want people to have a greater sense of responsibility for our children, right, in the raising of our children and the educating of our children than we're prepared to have.
Well, what's the value proposition? Now, see, I asked that question. If you walk down the street and you ask people, what's the value proposition in this context of education, not many people are going to have an answer. And what that means,
when you say what's the value proposition of
your child getting a quality education, of our public education system.
Oh, I thought you were saying what's the value proposition of having, say, West Orange invest in our children's education.
Specifically when it comes down to the public education system that your child is enrolled in.
Oh, they don't value it.
Right? But, and that's the problem, right? A lot of individuals are unable to make that connection. They don't really understand what the value proposition is, right? They don't understand or know, in many instances, that a person who graduates with a college degree is going to earn a substantially greater salary than someone who does not, right? There's a lot of information out there. I just don't think that people really are making a connection to see how this thing impacts them and how it all traces back to education.
And impacts the future.
Period.
Impacts whose future?
Everybody's.
But I wasn't being facetious when I asked that question, because the people who have decided that they're going to secede, that they're going to move, that they're going to carve out an area and make sure that their kids go to great schools, and
you look at New Jersey's unemployment rate, that's all drawing on state dollars. If we actually invest in making sure that our children are educated equitably across the board, you have a higher percentage of people paying into the economy.
But Jack Chitterley is going to come on and talk about that too. You're right. It is drawing on New Jersey's dollar, right? Mm-hmm. But people are doing what? They're moving out. People can afford. So this is what happens, right? When you have an overbearing burden on this side, the people who can afford to leave, they go. They say, I'm done. And so people who can afford to move out of New Jersey, they're gone. They're moving, and then the people who are here are searching around for somebody to pick up the slack.
But that's an excellent question to propose to any potential new governor. Because how are you going to deal with that from a state policy perspective? You still have people in the state that you have to care for and that you have to provide for.
All right, so Kalina says, and I would love you to call in if you can, Kalina. I know the hour of the show, most people at work. But she says there are thousands of parents who care about their children's education. What I would say is this. Those thousands of parents are exactly what I just described in terms of the people in West Orange, where they're looking on a micro level at their child's education, and they're not looking at some social greater good. They're saying, I'm going to get the best education for my kid. And so because they do that, they don't show up at board meetings. Because they do that, they don't show up at PT. They don't join the PTA. Because they do that, they see the conditions of some of these schools, but they don't chip any money in to make sure that there could be paint on the wall. They haven't created some volunteer program to say, you know what, we're going to go in on weekends and we're going to scrape the walls and paint them ourselves. See, they all sit back and they wait for somebody to give money. And I'm saying that these other people in these other communities, they're saying, no, we see the value proposition and we're willing to roll our sleeves up. We're willing to invest money out of our pocket to ensure that our children get an education. And I'm saying that that's not happening. So when you say that there are thousands of people who care, they care solely about their child's education. And that's why the community as a whole, to me, is falling apart. Because if those thousands of people stepped up with rollers and paintbrushes and scrapers and things, some of these schools that we're talking about right now wouldn't look the way that they look.
Let me tell you what would happen if they did show their paint brushes and their rollers.
What would happen?
You would have a lot of union members out there picketing, because that would be taking work away from union employees. Which is why, and while it sounds practical, I would love for parents to be able to just get up and say, "Hey, we're going to go in and we're going to go in and paint facilities." But that is something that, unfortunately, because of the bureaucracies that we have,
well, people go and they clean up their neighborhoods, right? and you know, when folks go and do that, that's less work that somebody who was part of the union in the sanitation department could have done.
And hopefully, some of our school board members are listening, and they can
push to make it happen.
They can push that issue and take it up. I think that'd be a great galvanizing
and it has been done in the past, right? But there are a lot of
American History did a beautification day.
Here we go.
We did one over at George Washington Carver. We'll have a Verizon come in a few years ago.
But
right?
See, I'm saying, but here it is again, right? I'm saying American History. They did it for American History.
Yep.
I'm saying, but American History, if they understood the philosophy that you just talked about, which is the kid who goes over to that other school that you're not helping paint, that kid lives in your neighborhood too. So once those parents at American History finished beautifying American History, they should have gone next door to the next school, and they should have been a part of galvanizing people to beautify that one, because they understood, like you said, the value of having a beautiful facility that the kids can, you know, learn and grow in. But because they're doing exactly what these other communities are doing. American History has formed their little community. And they're saying, we're going to take care of us. West Orange is saying, we want to take care of us. These other towns are saying, we want to take care of us. Give us our resources. Give us our money. Let us take care of ourselves. And we have to, and we can't afford to do that in Newark. We have to be more communal about what it is that we do. So all of these people who agree with you, and I do too, that if you have a more beautiful facility, it adds to. It is not the end all.
Absolutely not.
Right? But it adds to.
Yes.
And so if we understand that, especially you guys who have been out there and who have done it to different schools, why did you stop?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. Yeah. But to your point, when we talk about that add to, I think we want to have facilities in our communities that really speak to our children and want to and causes them to come in as opposed to run away from our facilities. You understand what I'm saying? So I'll go back to the Science Park as an example. I mean, Central High School, I think, also is one of the schools in the city that has a swimming pool. I mean, that's great. So now you're talking about additional programming and activities that you can have for children, right, outside of what's going on in the classroom. Because when we talk about educating and supporting the whole child, right? It also involves us doing things outside of the classroom space that might take place under the umbrella of the, under the roof of the school. But again, it's different. It's not just a teacher being in front of the classroom, right? Now, some kids outside of that, they might not have access to a public pool, depending on what part of the city that they live in, or might not feel comfortable going to the public. So again, it adds to the overall experience, right?
But now when we talk about, and I was reading about what Donald Trump's plan looks like, that he's going to be cutting a lot of programs.
Yeah, and we've known that with this Trump administration, their biggest focus, and we haven't seen anything different from them. We knew this coming in, that their biggest focus was going to be on expanding school choice.
Yes.
We've known that, and we've seen it. Every time we hear something about their plans to fund educational programs or to shut down educational programs, right? They're not reducing any of the spending that pertains to school choice and expansion programs. None of that. None of that. So we continue to see it. So my concern is that we see this, and communities like ours will find a way to miss out on it, right? And I think that, so when you start talking about expansion, school choice programs, etc., all right, let's start pushing the envelope when we talk about school choice, because preschool providers in our community, what are you guys providing? School choice, right? So why aren't we having a conversation now about how that funding, right, can be made available to programs like yours, right, and other providers that we have in our community, because we know that preschool education is so important, right?
I think that and I hear what you're saying. I think one of the issues with the school choice model, and it's not necessarily intended for our districts. In my opinion, it's just a way to alleviate those who are wealthier and can afford to pay for private school, a way to alleviate some of those bills. Because there's no way that a parent in Newark is going to be, even with a school voucher, is going to be able to take their child to South Orange or Short Hills or Livingston, to some of these greater schools, even if their child has the capability with a school choice voucher, and still afford it. So it's not set up in a way that's going to improve public education. I think it's set up in a way that's only going to further create this tiered system.
And we're going to come back after this break.
Blast Radio 94.3. Reggae, dance hall, soca,
yeah, you were.
hip hop and R&B,
Well, yeah,
African,
I am? Oh, wow.
disco,
So,
oldies
I would like
but
to unpack that a
goodies.
little more.
Hi, this is Janet Jackson.
We're bridging the
There's a
gap.
lot of
Seriously.
Like, I think
Blast Radio 94.3, New Jersey.
I think the whole
Are you looking for real Jamaican cooking? Look no further than the real, authentic, and bona fide spot in Newark, New Jersey. Stars Pressure Pot Restaurant at 347 Sanford Avenue, serving the best curry goat, oxtail, steamed fish, jerk curried, fried, and brown stew chicken. Call today,
I don't know if you want to skim this during the commercials, but this is the article that I was talking
There's
about.
always a
You can
special at
just
Stars Pressure Pot
skim it.
Restaurant. Stew beef Tuesdays, stew beef Wednesday, cowfoot Thursdays, seafood and fish fry Fridays, Saturdays, it's Portland Jamaica style jerk. You name it. Stars Pressure Pot Restaurant is open every day, Monday to Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday and Saturdays till 10 p.m. And check out early Sundays, noon to midnight, with all your favorite games. There's a live broadcast every Sunday at Stars Pressure Pot Restaurant with all your favorite DJs. Catering and delivery, call today, 973-350-6657, or check them on the web at starspressurepotrestaurant.com. It's always a good day at Stars Pressure Pot Restaurant. We know that when it comes to your vehicle maintenance, you've got a lot of options. In fact, with so many options, it can be challenging sometimes to find a reliable and affordable auto mechanic. But that's where we come in, Belmont Motor Works, with a commitment to providing our customers with honest, quality service at reasonable prices. Belmont Motor Works has one of the most modern, state-of-the-art automotive service and repair facility in the entire state of New Jersey. Our technology, education, and expertise will provide you with the best car care service imaginable.
fashionable. For an appointment, dial 973-268-8199. Right now, get a check engine light diagnostic, an oil change or tune-up, brakes, or just a performance upgrade. Belmont Motorworks got it covered. We're your one-stop shop, the European specialist specializing in BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Range Rover, all luxury and high-performance vehicle. 973-268-8199. We also install engines, transmissions, starters, alternators, timing belts, water pumps, and so much more. Trust the trusted Belmont Motorworks. Conveniently located at 531 Central Avenue in Newark, New Jersey. And find us on the web at www.belmontmotorworks.com.
Mr. G represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We don't splash out the music on them.
You're listening to the Eric Dawson Radio Show on 94.3 FM.
All right, so this is Eric Dawson. We're back, and we're having a lively discussion. I don't know, DeNiqua, if we finished the point that you were trying to make.
I think before we went to break, we were talking about school choice vouchers, and Rashon had an interesting point.
Yeah, so I wanted to just kind of unpack that a little bit so that our listeners are very clear about what school choice actually means, because I think we have this push from a national perspective to push and fund school choice, and beneath that there's this initiative to add additional funding to support voucher programs, right, which is taking public dollars and spending it in the private domain. But then we also have, in the state of New Jersey, we actually have a school choice program that allows students, as long as your district is registered to participate, your child can actually enroll in a school district in another town that's also participating in the school choice program, and the state would pay the funds that your child will receive, instead of going to your home district, would then be received by that other district that your child would be receiving. So are you in support of, what are your thoughts around the school choice program that we particularly have here in the state of New Jersey? Do you think it's something that's providing additional benefits to families that want to seek options, outside of their communities?
So just to be forthright, I have not done much research on it. Aside from the initial research I did during my time on the board. And I know at that time it was very limited in terms of the number of schools that were participating, or districts that were participating, and also in terms of the number of students in different grade levels that were able to transfer out. I think, though, that you still have the same issue of taking money out of the district that still has to service, I think we're at 35,000 now in Newark. So taking money out of the district that still has to service a large population of students who, come to school with challenges. According to the district's website, I think 96% more than any other district. And if my numbers are wrong, I'm sorry. Newark serves 96% more than any other district low-income students. So when you start pulling those additional dollars, and it may not be a significant amount at first, but that starts to add up. The more children that leave, the more children that go into other districts, whether it be the independent charter districts or whether it be a neighboring school district via the school choice program.
So one of the things that I say, and I don't know if you're a frequent listener of the show, but is that a lot of parents see this scenario. There's big holes in the bottom of a ship that their kids are on, and the ship is sinking, and they're looking to rescue them off and put them in a safer ship. And as a result, right, the people who are left trying to patch the holes in the sinking ship are fewer people, right? Because those other people have gotten off.
That's a great analogy.
And so part of what I hear, and I haven't been able to reconcile it, is there are folks who are saying to those parents, no, leave your kids on and let them be a part of helping patch the ship that's sinking, and watch this other ship just float by. I can't with a clear conscience tell any parent to do that.
And you know, I get it. Like, I completely get it. My children are in public school, and you know, I have to argue and write emails and phone calls when I think something's not right. And I would never tell any other mom, dad, auntie, uncle to make the decision to not do what they believe is best for their child. But we have to, you know, using your analogy, which I think is a really great one, if we have 100 holes on this ship and we only have 50 people trying to plug it, something else, even if we're not going to, you know, have those other children stay in, plug in those holes, then someone else needs to come in and plug the holes until we can get all the children off the ship. And I agree with that. I agree with that. And that, I think that is the ball and the opportunity that was missed when charters were first introduced, or even when, you know, choice was first introduced. It was, let's make the choice to save some children, but you still have these over here. And so the state has a responsibility, the city has a responsibility, the community has a responsibility to fill those holes until all the children get off the ship and are headed to the right island.
And I think that we don't assign the necessary, I don't want to say blame, but accountability is a better word, to all of those other people in the community who are sitting on their hands while the ship is sinking. You know, we're sitting and blaming all these other people. Meanwhile, there are a whole bunch of elected and selected officials who are literally sitting on their hands as the ship just gets, gets filled more and more with water, and these kids are drowning.
Well, I think we always have to come back to that essential question: how vested are those individuals? Right? You start looking at their track record or doing some research on their history. Where are their children going?
Well, no, I agree.
Where are their kids going to receive their educations? However, these are the individuals who are constantly elected, selected, appointed, and put in these positions of leadership to dictate how things are going to work in this educational space, and they themselves don't have a vested interest. I personally, I have a problem with that.
And you know, we talked about it at the beginning of the show, but I think it's an accountability issue, like you said, and I think it's an education and awareness issue as well. I was watching the council meeting the other night, and Sheila Montague was asking about, she's a district leader in the West Ward, she was asking about community meetings in the West Ward, and, you know, as a district leader, she wasn't aware of them. So if this is someone who is out in the community, who is in touch with her community, her neighbors, her residents, and she's trying to get information out, and that's not happening, I think that's just indicative of the lack of connection and the lack of exposure that we have between our community and our elected officials. So we need to maybe, instead of waiting for those elected officials to call community meetings, maybe we need to call them and tell them to come. This is the time and the date and the place to be, and to hear our concerns.
Well, that would be the dog. That would be the dog wagging the tail. But right now, the tail wags the dog over and over and over again. I agree. I agree that should happen. But and this is why I think that these shows that we do are so important, because you know, like Rashon says, well, you know, if we recognize all of these ailments, right, but we continue to do the same thing, we're not doing anything to, you know, to heal our community, then we can just expect the exact same thing. I mean, that's the definition of insanity, right?
It is.
It is. So, you know, I think when we look at our educational system as a whole, right, Newark is, I believe Newark has the opportunity to become the top destination for public education in the Northeast, period, right? I think it can happen. I don't believe that it happens with this separate market space that we talk about, right? With like the charter schools over here and the traditional public schools over here. We go back to that conversation, you mentioned something earlier, you know, like the true intent of charter schools, right? They were, you know, intended for individuals to try innovative things figure out if those things work, and then transfer those best practices into our traditional public schools. I believe because that's not happening on a large scale, that a lot of our students are missing out, right? So we have North Star High School, North Star Academy High School, right? Ranked top school in Newark, high school, number 24 in the state of New Jersey. Like, there should be huge, that partnership between Newark Public Schools and North Star should be huge, right? I don't know if it's something that should strictly focus on professional development, or if it should focus on, you know, innovative curriculum, something. But there needs to be a strong partnership there because, right, they have the results, they have the track record that shows they're doing what needs to be done to move students forward. And I also think there's opportunities for charter schools to learn from traditional public schools. But if we're serious as a community about moving this forward, then I think there has to be more opportunities for charter schools, traditional public schools.
But I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here. What do you say to the people who say, well, one of the ingredients that has allowed North Star to be successful is that the quality of student that they are working with, which is different than the quality of student that you know, some of these failing schools are working with. So when you say, well, I want to share best practices, well, I mean, well, why don't you just give me all your kids and put them over here? And guess what? My school will now have those test scores.
And I think that is the key ingredient that so often gets left out of the conversation. It's not just about picking up your model and dropping it here. We have to look at each child as an individual. I remember when you were on the board, you said every child should have an individual education plan.
Absolutely.
And that is so true, because every child comes to school with different needs and different abilities and different skill sets that we have to learn how to tap into. Now, is that a heavy lift for a school to achieve? Absolutely. Will that take a lot of work? Absolutely. And I think if we had more people who believed in that possibility of Newark being a great educational system again one day, we would have people come in and make those investments and understand and expect that you're not going to see it in year 1, year 2, year 3. It probably won't be evident until year 5, because you're trying to redirect the ship mid-course. So, but people don't want to stick with reform long enough to actually see it be successful.
And when you say people, what
now hold on. Let me unpack, because I want to go back to the comment you made earlier about the agenda and not having leadership that keeps us on point and keeps us on message. What that means is we lack leadership that has a commitment to a long-term vision. That's a huge problem.
But I'm gonna say that the community lacks long-term vision, so that we don't hire elected officials who can run the drill. So we don't do our job. See, look, yeah. And you know, my big issue with elected officials is that during campaigns they talk a lot of crap about what they're going to do, and so I get on them and I just want them to be honest about the fact that when they stood up there and said they were going to do what they were going to do, they knew they were lying, and they should just admit that they were lying. That's my.
Do you really believe they were lying?
I do. No. I'm gonna tell you. I'm gonna tell you because if they weren't lying, you know what they would really say? They would step up and say, you know what? I don't know how much of this I can do.
Okay.
We have a huge task ahead of us. And just like you said, DeNiqua, it may be 10 years or 20 years. The thing that I'm trying to do may not, you know, it may not reach fruition until I'm long buried, right? The change is going to be glacial. See, they don't want to do that. They want to have these very aspirational campaigns, right? And these, you know, as my other co-host Kevin Jenkins says, these declarations about how I'm going to do this, how that's going to get. And they all know. Now, I would give, I'd give a pass to people who have never served in political office before, that they may not know.
Because they have a true and earnest.
Right, that's right. They have but the people who have been in office before, who are running for re-election or who are running for higher office, they know. And I think that they did a disservice, and that's why I call them out on it all the time. But we as a community, we know what our point of pain is, right? So I'll give you an example. If I need a car, and you say, I'm going to get everybody in the community a car, I'm going to ask him to say, well, DeNiqua, tell me how you're going to get me my car. And what kind of car are you going to get me? When am I going to have? I'm going to start asking you questions, right? Because I'm going to. But if I simply listen to you say, you're going to give me a car, and I say, I'm going to vote for DeNiqua because she said she's going to give me a car, then that's on me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's not popular.
But if you were Oprah,
then you might believe it.
You know.
You get a car.
What's under your seat? What's under your seat?
That's absolutely right.
But no, I mean, can you imagine an elected official or an aspiring elected official standing before a crowd of people and saying, hey, we have 5 more years of this, or 10 more years of this, but in 10 years, this is what is going to happen? Like, unfortunately, we have been conditioned to believe that we are I need it now generation. We are I need it now society. Everything is instant gratification. So it's hard to sustain people. And I'm not saying that that's an excuse for lying or overselling or over embellishing what you can deliver on, but it's hard to get people to believe and attach themselves to something that you're telling them they're not going to get for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And so, you know, how do we recondition ourselves to be in it for the long haul? How do we recondition ourselves to be patient and wait and stick to the fight, even if we do have this one agenda and platform that we keep coming back to?
Right. So how do we get to community building? That's what it comes down to, right? How do we get to community building? And, I mean, I would say the answer to that is pockets of courageous people who are having honest conversations, you know, take advantage of platforms like this or advantage of technology that allows you to broaden the conversation or to broaden the audience with whom you're having the conversation with. But we have to do that. I mean, because look, the reality is that you know, it's a huge task. It is a huge task, and you've got people who you know, who because they have selfish special interests, they look to torpedo people who are trying to do good work because they benefit when things are dysfunctional, right? So they don't want it to get better, and you have to recognize who those people are and try to discard them. So, but the point is, you got to roll your sleeves up and recognize it's not going to happen overnight. It is a, you know, you have as many, like I said, you have as many people fighting on the other side as are fighting on this side. And you just have to be in the fight. But while you're in the fight, and this is where people, you know, for me, I think they bail because they become resentful of people who say, you know what, I recognize the fight. I'm not willing to put my family or my children in harm's way while we're fighting. I'm going to move them to higher ground, right? And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to try to fight. Right, but I'm going to take care of my kids. And so even the people that you were talking about earlier who have their children in charter schools, right, and they're elected officials, I don't begrudge them doing that. It was a choice that they made. My issue is the hypocrisy.
Yeah,
that's all. My only issue is the hypocrisy. So again, I'm back to just being truthful. Don't lie. Say, yo, I did this. Hey, listen, and if any of you all want your kids to go there too, I'll put them on a bus with my kids and we'll send them there. And for the rest of us, if there are 5 of us who are left on this ship trying to plug the hole, there'll be 5 of us. But that's not what they do. They stand up and tell everybody else that they should stay.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they're packing their bags at home and they're leaving. That's where I have the problem.
And that's it's untruthful. You know, I've had an issue with that for a number of years. And you know, we'll continue to have individuals who do those kinds of things, but I will, you know, go back to the critical question that we were asking individuals during the election cycle. You know, what's your vested interest? Like, if you have kids, where do your kids go to school right now? Because that allows you to, you know, it allows you to digest their commentary much differently when you have that understanding. Right? You're kind of now looking at those people like, well, what's your motive? Like anybody in their right mind would say to a person, well, why are you telling me to keep my kids over here, but your kids are in school over there? Like now you start having those conversations, you start asking those critical questions of people, and they now have to answer because you know you have that information. I don't think there's enough of that that's actually happening. So getting back to this 5 to 7 year commitment that we need to have, I'm gonna just be honest with you and tell you what I think will occur in that time period. We all know there's some holes. Some have been plugged. Some have been plugged very well. Others haven't. I believe the bottom of this ship drops out in the course of the next few school years, and what I'm specifically talking about is the fiscal crisis that we see right now, particularly in the city of Newark. I think that charter schools will, at the rate that they are going now, I believe charter schools will end up serving about 42 to 43% of the student population by the year 2021. And in the interim, I believe because of the plugging that we've seen within the Newark Public School District, I think the bottom of that thing is going to fall out, and there's going to be huge issues that need to be resolved before that shit can be turned around.
Well, but then if it gets to that point, I mean, that's what we call the tipping point, right? So once you get to the tipping point,
so it needs to happen.
But how do you reverse it at that point? Because once you've pulled enough resources out of the traditional public school system, right? Where do funds come from?
Yeah, where's that 38%?
What is I say if what you're saying is true, then I'm going to say that once you get to that percentage, it's going to accelerate the decline of the traditional public school.
But let me tell you why, and I want to tell you why I'm saying that, because I'm speaking in the universe of what's already been pre-approved. Like these schools, when I'm speaking of as it is right now, based off of what charter schools have been already approved for as it relates to their student population, if there are no additional seats that are added on, we expect to see that to be around 42 to 43% by the year 2020, 2021. And that's not too far away, right? So if we continue to see that on this natural trajectory, let's say we don't have new residents moving in to Newark at that same pace to now allow for students to enroll in the traditional public schools, you also have to deal with the fact that there's a faculty to student ratio and there's a teacher to student ratio. Now, as the students exit from your school district, same way if you had a business, right? If you were losing customers, let's say you ran a McDonald's and your customer base was shrinking, would you keep the same amount of staff that you had in here?
No.
To make the burgers and to make the fries and to do all of those things? No, right? So that, unfortunately.
But then once you start to eliminate your staff, the quality of your product goes down. Then you get fewer customers. You eliminate more staff. The quality suffers more. You have fewer customers. You eliminate more staff until finally you close your doors.
So how do you sustain that, right? Because I get it. We also need these people, right? Because the people are the resources also, right, to deliver the services to the students. But how do you balance that with also having the need to provide programming, extracurricular activities, etc., etc.? And I just don't believe that the district has found that balance yet. I think that if you really scratch the surface, and we look at the number of teachers that we have educating our schools, I don't think that there's been much of a drop or decline over the last 5 years, even though we've seen thousands of kids leaving the school district every year. So you still kind of have a similar model or makeup of staff members, even though you're serving a much smaller population. And by serving a much smaller population, that means that there's less revenue inside of your district to even pay those people.
So your burn rate is higher.
Right? And if you're robbing Peter to pay Paul, what happens at the end of the day? And that's my concern, that happens. And I think it will happen at a critical time where residents in places like West Orange, as you say, are asking that critical question.
Give my money.
Where's my money going, and why do I continuously have to supplement?
You're 100% right. Listen, I personally think that the current makeup of traditional public schools, well, people valued education at one point, right? And traditional public schools worked because kids came to school ready to work, communities were intact, all of those things kind of worked. Now there is such a heavy burden on government, right, to fill those gaps of where the community's not stepping up, where the family's not stepping up, and I just don't think that's the role of government. And I think that that's what we're seeing. We're asking government to do what we're not prepared to do.
Now, and that's, so I hear exactly what you're saying. And these are the conversations that we hear this from individuals, even on a federal level. There should be less government interference, right? And the decision making should be happening locally. So if we took that same viewpoint in our community, right, and looked at our community in that same way and said, we don't need the local municipality or the state, right, acting on our behalf and coming in and making all of these decisions, and we should be doing those things locally, we will be in a much different position.
No, I think that we would be doing exactly what we're doing, which is, what was the school you said that they had the school beautification, right? You would have clusters of people in the community taking care of their schools, making sure that their schools where their kids go are taken care of, and then the other ones wouldn't. Much like the article that I asked DeNiqua to skim while we were on break, where you have these communities now who are seceding. They're looking, going, you know what, we're of common mind about what it is that we want to do. Screw those people because they're lost. We're going to all unite together and we're going to create a great school here, make sure our kids go there, right? And we're going to give the resources we know our kids need. Are you guys down? Yep, we're down, and they're going to do that. And they're going to say, the hell with the school down the street.
So I think that's probably the very first and most critical task that any new superintendent, when we talk about having local control, any new superintendent has to be, and that also has to be the driving question when that school board or whatever school board is doing that superintendent search. We need somebody who's going to be able to come in and look at this problem analytically, look at this problem strategically, and figure out how do we keep the bottom from falling out and drowning all these children that are left on the boat. And you know, I think that's something that our school board members should be thinking about right now.
And then look, I want you guys to understand this too, right? Because we talked last week, Rashon, about, you know, the huge and cavernous deficit that a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old suffers if they don't get preschool. Right? How far behind? What would we say? 30 million word gap.
Yeah, 30 million word
gap. Right? 30 million word gap. But then there was an article I was reading today which talked about the enormous number of college students who need remedial classes. We're spending over $1.3 billion a year in providing remedial, and straddling these students who oftentimes drop out of college. But in the meantime, while they're trying to struggle through it, we're straddling them with additional student debt, right? So all of this is happening, right, around the fact that so this is the boat that I'm telling you. So these are all the holes from preschool all the way up until they graduate. They're not ready. They're not prepared. We're not doing our job.
And this is one of the things that I came on the show a few years ago, Eric, the show that you were doing with you and Oz, and I talked about the park assessment. Right? There was a lot of heat around the park assessment. One of the things that I supported and I really liked about the park assessment was that there was an agreement amongst a number of colleges and universities throughout the nation that stated that once the park assessment became the graduation requirement, that students who passed the park exam, the park assessment, would not have to take any remedial courses when they went to college. Like, that was the precursor, because they wanted to make the assessment that rigorous, to say that if these students who have gone out and actually mastered this content and passed this rigorous exam, we know that these students are prepared, and these students should not have to be forced to take remedial courses. And I thought that was a great incentive for school districts. I think it still is, right? Because now it puts pressure on them to make sure that their students are prepared. And I was hoping that would then start to add on to that debate that was going on throughout the nation about the enormous amount of student debt that we've been taking in. We also know students who end up taking remedial courses, they're more likely to drop out of college. I think it's like a 50% dropout rate for those students. So when we look at Essex County College, I think that's a huge example. I mean, in the community, Essex County College had been known as the 13th grade. Right, and that was the word, like, oh, you at Essex County, you're in the 13th grade.
Well, this stat says that 56% of African American students and 45% of Hispanic students require remedial courses.
It's crazy. And where they coming from? Right. What kind of school districts are they coming from?
Right. And so when we say that, right, so that's that sinking ship I'm talking about again. So that kid stays, that parent stays, buys into the dream of we're going to fix it, and then that kid comes out and needs the 13th grade. And then is struggling, and then becomes part of the statistic of being likely to drop out of college.
So let me ask this question, right? Because we talked about, being honest, even if it's depressing. If we get the leader that we need, if we get the resources that we need, isn't it evident that at least for a few years, there's still going to be children going to college in need of remediation? There's still going to be.
There will be. There will be.
Yeah.
But now you can have. So if you're dealing, in my opinion, if you're dealing honestly with the community, right, then you're giving them honest projections, and you're saying, I mean, and yeah. So a person who says this will most likely not be elected because the electorate doesn't want to hear the truth, right? But the truth would be that you're probably going to have the next generation that's going to need remedial classes. How do we save the following generation? That's where our focus should be, right? And now you should create some sort of a program for those who you now know are going to need remediation, right? And now you set off to develop that. But then you have a separate program that's running parallel. Says, how do we deal with the kids who are coming through? And then you have to say, honestly, how do we deal with the parents who want to get their kids off the ship? Right? And then what do we honestly tell the parents if they decide that they want to keep their kids on the ship? And what are they likely to experience during the rough times? And then you have to have those honest conversations.
And it needs to happen. However, folks are not going to be willing to have a conversation.
Well, they got to do work.
To embrace parents wanting to jump off of the ship, because when the parent jumps off the ship, guess what goes with them?
The money.
Right? And without the money, you can't get the resources, right? Which is the whole context of the conversation.
But you know what? But so,
not being able to
but here's the thing, right? If I'm a parent who decides I want to stay on the ship, and you two decide you want to jump off the ship, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but the way it's working now is I go to the district or I go to some politician and I try to get them to convince you that you should stay on the ship. And then when they come to you, they say, well, we don't have the resources, right? I think that I should be the one coming to you, selling you on why you should stay on the ship, telling you how I'm willing to roll my sleeves up and work with you if you're willing to work, and we can try to make this thing happen. But because I'm sitting there and I'm not really willing to work, right? but for some reason I don't want to jump off the ship. But I'm not willing to go do anything. I'm not pitching in. I'm not showing up at PTA meeting. I'm not doing any of those things. But I'm resentful of the fact that you're not going to stay here too. I think that that's part of the problem. I would dare say, well, I don't know the percentages, so I'm not going to say. I wonder, though, what percentage of the people who are dismayed at the fact that folks want off the ship, how many of them are actively working every day to repair the ship to make it one that people should want to stay on? Do you understand what I'm saying? And so if you're not doing that work, if you're waiting for somebody else to convince those people to stay on the ship, they're not going to stay because they see the work or lack of that you're putting in.
I think that's so. To your point, what's being packaged? What's right?
Dude, but that's it's no different than if you're a homeowner, right? And you live on a block, and when you first move on a block, houses are pretty cool. The neighbors are taking care of their lawns. Then all of a sudden, right, what do you see? You see somebody over there, putting, living room furniture on the front lawn.
Yeah.
Right? Then you scratch your head. You go,
oh, they go to neighborhood.
Yeah, you go. Well, you scratch. You go, okay, well, and then you see somebody put a above ground pool on the front lawn. Yeah. Right, and you say, "Oh boy," and then you see another guy down the street. He starts fixing cars on the front lawn. At some point, you're going to go get a realtor, right? And you're going to put your house up before the property value plummets, and that's what's happening.
Instead of just going to the neighbor across the street and saying,
right.
"Hey, put that."
Right, and that's right. And then I should go to all my other neighbors and say to all my other neighbors, if we don't fix this,
it's going to be a problem.
It's going to be a problem. And then we should all go as a community to those 3 homes and tell those people, get that pool off your lawn, get the cars out of your driveway, get the whatever, and we should be active about that.
But see, it's easier to do what you just said. That it's easier to now call a realtor because now there's no situation in which I'm making that neighbor or that other person uncomfortable about the fact that they have this furniture in their lawn or this pool.
No. Because I'm saying because if I go over to my neighbor and I tell my neighbor to move it, my neighbor looks at me because I'm just one person, right? So my neighbor gives me the finger, and then I say, well, okay, I'm gonna go get Rashon. And I'm going to go get DeNiqua. Then we're going to go back to that neighbor. But I knock on your door, you go, I don't have time. And DeNiqua will say, I'm busy. Right? So now I go down the street, and that neighbor says that they don't have time either. I'm the one guy who's going trying to keep the neighborhood the way that it should be.
And eventually you give up.
And eventually I'm going to give up. I'm going to say, okay, you all are sitting here looking out your way. Every time they throw a house party on the front lawn, you guys look out of your blinds and you watch Eric walk down the street. Go, oh, Eric going down the street again. Let's see what happens. But you're not going to walk with me down the street. And at some point I'm going to say, you know what? They don't get it, the value.
Yeah. So how do we get people to accept social responsibility?
Well, see, that's the engagement part that everybody talks about, right? We got to engage the community.
Which Nork has been getting wrong since forever, according to the comprehensive compliance investigation, 1995. That was one of the things cited in there, right? Lack of parental involvement, parental engagement, right? So, 22 years, still getting it wrong. But go ahead.
Well, if I knew the answer, I don't. But one of the things that I do believe, again, is we have to not be afraid of being honest. Yeah. I think that is the first step, that there's so many people who have political ambitions, and those political ambitions prevent them from having the courage to be honest. And so when they start off dishonest about it, then it's just downhill from there. Because each candidate is just trying to be, trying to outdo the other one. And so in outdoing the other one, they're diluting the honesty. You know what I mean? So now what you wind up with is an elected official who just lied to you. And so now the electorate is waiting for that elected official to do something that they're not going to do. And that's the truth. That is the God's honest truth. And then the electorate is disappointed. Right? And that's one thing. The other piece of it is this, and I mean this too. We need to have elected officials who are independent from big money, right? So when you guys watch elections as a community and you're not willing to participate unless somebody's going to give you money from their campaign to go canvass, right? Or get you involved on election day. Well, I'm not going to get involved if they give me $100. Well, again, what's the value, right? Is the value of your community that $100? Or is the value of your community being better, you know, that you roll your sleeves up and you get to work? Because maybe the candidate who didn't have any money was the best candidate, but they couldn't get elected because you weren't willing to work for nothing.
But then there has to be a piece that is solely separate and apart from the election process that is just focused on educating the community on
so
what they should look for.
I had
here we are.
So here we are, right? And so I had on one of my internet shows a year ago now, I had the great Mayor Ken Gibson on.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, he was at the forefront of the emergence of black leadership in Newark, right? And so I asked him, I said, so tell me what we need to do. He said, Eric, it's real simple. He says, what we did then, we had area boards, right, where we educated people in the community. He said, but it's registering people to vote. That's what you have to do. You have to be about the business of always registering people to vote. And this is what I tell people too, Rashon, right? I say those who are in power, they don't spend time registering people to vote. Why? Because they're in power.
It's not to their benefit.
It's not to their benefit. But so if you know, though, that registering people to vote is where the change comes from, and the people you have elected are not willing to do that, then it should be clear to you that they're not really willing to have change. See, and then the engagement piece. The engagement piece, if you do it honestly, is about sharing power.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But we're not willing to, but they're not willing to share power. So they don't really want to engage you. They don't want to inform and enlighten you because now you know. And now you want a seat at the table. You want to start asking questions. They don't want you to ask questions. They just want to corral you and herd you into a booth to vote. So those are telltale signs. So when you say, well, what can we begin to do? Those are real simple things. Get engaged, get involved. You know, register. Look, you have 270,000 people in Newark, right? I don't know, 130,000 registered voters. Today, I don't know how many people turned 18. Go find them, register them to vote.
But that should actually be a part of, I think, and when we talk about the social responsibility, this should be an initiative that takes place in every high school. Like, and I feel like the students are there. We have this information. We should be teaching our children about civic engagement, and this, I think, is a huge part of that. Just like we're going to get our kids, you know, excited about going out to be able to take their get their driver's license, right, and take that road test. We should have the same level of excitement when it comes down to registering to vote. Now, jumping back to that point of being honest. You know, when we were on the board, DeNiqua, we had to complete some the self-evaluations, right, of the board members. Now, from your perspective, do you believe that folks were really honest when they were completing those board assessments? Do you feel like it was some things that should have been placed on those assessments, on those board self-evaluations that people neglected to put up there?
I don't remember all the answers. I do remember that when we got the results back, I felt it was more honesty than I expected at first going into it, but I couldn't really say that there could have been more. I mean, I think as a board, and I don't remember what our results were, but I think as a board we had a lot of room to grow. Even then, and we were doing some things and definitely increasing our professional development, increasing our awareness and presence throughout the state, and learning really about educational policy. And I would hope that that's the aspiration of anybody who serves on that board, right? You're there to inform and direct policy for your district. And so you can't do that without knowing on a larger scale what's happening federally, statewide. You have to be involved in those different associations. But it's a lot of work.
Let me ask you a question. And I want to ask you this too, Rashon. Being on the board, what would you say your biggest accomplishment was?
I'll let you go for ladies first.
Of course. I have to think about it. I think that's probably one of the most frustrating things I felt after 3 years, that I did not accomplish more, but putting it into perspective, I could not accomplish on my own. I think one of the things that I'm proud of is that as program and instruction chair, we really took a hard line at curriculum, and making sure that there was instructional guidance for our school system, and also that we talked more about the alignment between preschool and elementary. There's so much investment made into preschool, but then when you get to kindergarten, it just drops off. And so I'm happy that Senator Ruiz took up in the Education Committee this kindergarten readiness. So now what we do in preschool is actually translated into kindergarten, and they're keeping that assessment piece going forward, and they're talking about developmentally appropriate practices that look and feel like what a child is coming out, because it's just a summer between leaving pre-K4 and going to kindergarten. Right. And we can't expect a child to dramatically change that much. So that's one thing that I'm proud of, that alignment piece, that instructional piece, and just the professional development that I was able to get through SBA. And
how important is that?
It's very important, because, like I said, you have to know educational policy. You have to know how you set the tone for your district. And we were an advisory group, but we were able to really tap into a lot of different things that were happening throughout the state. We were able to sort of hold the district's feet to the fire. We were moving actually towards board certification at the time when we left, and that's a huge compliment for a board that is under state control.
And now, prior to becoming a board member, what did you do?
So I've been in preschool for 20 years now.
Okay. So you were in education before?
I was in education. I've been.
And did you feel that being in the educational space and then running for the board and sitting on the board was provided you an advantage to somebody who isn't in the educational space and they run to sit on the board? It
did, and I don't think that every person that sits on the board has to come from that educational space. I think you want to fill certain gaps. You want people with different experiences and perspectives, but there should definitely, if there's 9 board members, at least 1/3 of that should be people who come from an educational world and understand educational policy.
And then what other gaps, you said, and fill other spaces, what other spaces do you think are important?
You have to understand finance, right? Because school budgets, it's a lot to unpack. You have to understand strategic planning. You have to understand relationships, the superintendent and board relationship, how that unfolds itself. Now ours was a little different because we were an advisory board, but there were still certain elements that we could have played as if we were a real acting board, and professionalism, bringing that into the aspect and the goal, and then understanding what it is to manage or oversee an organization that has 40,000 children, 5,000 faculty and staff, and that's a huge lift. So you want people who have all of those types of experiences and knowledge, and people who want to learn more.
Absolutely.
Now it's your turn.
And then former chairman.
So for me, I think it was, I would say the biggest accomplishment was actually getting the board to start to understand the importance of the professional development. So when I first came on the board, we didn't have any board members who were certified through the School Boards Association. So when you left, you got your certification. I received mine. Ariana Perello went on to get hers. So she served as chair after I did. Let's see, Donald Jackson went on to get his. Phil Sillinger, Marquise got his, Antoinette Baskerville Richardson received hers, and then also during Ariana's tenure, at the end of that, we did get the board certified.
Oh, good.
So we kept moving in that direction. So I was very proud of that because there was a lot of resistance early on, you know, with having those conversations. And somebody I have to give credit to Donna Jackson. Donna Jackson and Cassandra Dock, they called the New Jersey School Boards Association, and Veronica Branch, they called the New Jersey School Boards Association when I was serving as chairman, and they asked the field representative, how many of your current board members have the certification that you offer? I got a call from that field rep and said, hey, there's some community members who called here and they asked for the training records of your board members because it's public information, and they wanted to specifically know how many board members had their certification. And I was like, okay, well, you know, it's good information. They came to the next board meeting we had, and they stood up and they asked that question. We want to know how many of y'all have certifications right now. And I was like, I do. But, well, you know, but where individuals are working on it, close to it. And I think that, along with the commentary that you and Ozma had on your show, because you guys talked about that a lot, I think that helped fuel other board members who saw that in order for them to even be considered as, you know, relevant board members or to be seen as individuals who are taking their job seriously, they had to get involved in the training. So that and strengthening the relationship between the board and the State Department of Education, that was really, really huge. I don't think we got enough credit for that as a board. I remember being down at the school board convention down in AC, and we actually had a meeting with Commissioner Hespy down there, and those conversations prompted us to then complete the first district assessment of the North Board of Education, which was our personal assessment of the district's progress. We used the district's data from the State Department of Education, and we put it together. It didn't paint a great picture of the district, but it was truthful, it was honest, and you know, we put that information out there for the public. So those things I think were really huge because it really showed that we had the capability to actually be professional and to anchor down and do what needs to be done for the community.
But you know what, and I say this too, and tell me what you think about this, DeNiqua. My position is that the electorate needs to know how to micromanage their government. Like micromanage, like you get managed at your job. And I think Donna Jackson, Cassandra Dock, they do a great job at that, right?
Yeah.
They, you know, and then, you know, you want to create those pressure points within the community where elected officials wake up and don't feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Right?
And you have to do that.
Yeah, where they don't feel comfortable, where, you know, you've got voices, truthful, honest voices in the community that are always provoking accountability, that are always agitating, you know, in a constructive way. Because I think if you do that, it'll drive people. And I mean, look, you might not have been my choice during the election, but at the end of the day, if I'm on the side of the community, I want you to do well, right? Because if you do well, the community benefits.
Yeah.
And I think if we have more of that too, but that's the community, and not just the voters. It's the faith-based community. I mean, I'm going to do a whole nother show on them, because they're the ones who a lot of the community considers to be the front line, right? And that's why during election time, those are the ones who have the politicians come and speak in front of their congregations, because the belief is that the congregation has faith, you know, in what, you know, this faith-based leader has to say. But they don't stand up on off-year election time, during off-year election time. You know, they only come out and you know, I know why, and I don't bite my tongue about it. I mean, you know, they cut their deals and all those kinds of things, and it's important that the community recognizes that too and says, okay, I understand that pastor such and such or bishop such and such is cutting a political deal, and you know, but in whatever deal he's cutting for himself, how are we benefiting? And if we're not benefiting, then you need to be, you know, grabbing Deacon such and such up by his collar.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, and definitely our community-based organizations, our faith-based organizations, being more accountable to and educating our parents and educating our community on what the needs are, what the issues are, and holding them steadily. Because you do see that uptick around election time, campaign time, and then you see it quickly fade away. And, that's our fault. One thing I think that you should have mentioned was our governance manual.
Oh, we got a couple minutes.
We did not have that before.
We got 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Go.
Our governance manual, that was definitely an achievement.
Yeah, so, and this is what I would say to the current board members who are there. I think because of that work that we did during our time on the board, there isn't a need for them to like go and reinvent the wheel. But we kind of really put together a clear game plan to help them be successful and to figure this thing out, in terms of what they need to do to develop themselves. One thing that, I thought that was really, really helpful the year that I served as chairman was the committee structure. The committee structure was very important because I really took a step back and said, you know what, forget what committees people want to be on. I'm appointing people to committees based off of their skill set and where their level of expertise was. So folks are like, yeah, I want to be on the budget committee. It's like, all right, you have experience, like, financial fiscal management. No, well, you can't be on this committee. But I do know that you have experience teaching. So guess what? We need you on the curriculum committee. And we only put 3 people on each one of the committees that year. And what that allowed was for like a floating seat to be available. So let's say in curriculum, the curriculum committee, there was going to be a huge discussion about purchasing new textbooks for the district. There was an open seat in the finance committee. So after they reviewed that in their curriculum committee, right, that DeNiqua, who was the chair of that curriculum committee, could also come sit in on our finance committee meeting and say, hey, this is what we discussed in our curriculum. We really need these new books because it's aligned to X, Y, and Z. And now that conversation took place between the 2 committees and everybody was on the same page going into the board meetings. Like, that really opened up the line of communication more.
And I'll also say that when you mentioned the committee structure, one of the things that we ended up developing was committee report outs.
Yeah.
Because before that, people would sit in their committees, they would have their meetings, and then we get to the business meeting, and it was just business as usual. Well, you just did the work in your committee. So, and you're supposed to be making a recommendation. You're supposed to be advising the rest of us on, how we should be thinking about these different resolutions and businesses coming before the board. So we put that policy in place that committees would write written report to make actual recommendations.
Well, listen, we're out of time.
Okay.
But DeNiqua, it was a pleasure having you. I hope you come back.
Yes, thank you.
It was comfortable, the conversation, and I think that people, hopefully they got something out of it. But for now, this is Eric.
And this is Rashon.
And we're here with DeNiqua, and we're out.
Peace.
Thank you.
May I be the first to say good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock.
Save that for the night, because when it's true. It's true. It is as hot as it is. It's definitely true. I don't know why.
Continue to expand and get folks.
Say Terry, agree.
The focus is.
I don't think this is for the
community.